Disclaimer, I'm a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. Hi. Let's begin with a hypothetical. Let's say that you have a leftist content creator. Let's say that this leftist content creator has been recently exploring a lot of different ways to present what she wants to talk about on this social platform. Let's say that this content creator has tried out a couple different ways, video essays, mediating disputes, and a couple things in between. Let's say that something else that this person described, or something else that this person tried out, was debating. And let's say that this person had a debate with someone who has some, shall we say, not great views. And let's say that this debate goes over wonderfully. Hooray. Let's say that this person gets a lot of attention for it. And let's say that this person, who is a relatively small content creator, actually gets someone to make a video covering, like, an entire opinion piece covering the debate that she had with this other person. And let's say that this person, the content creator, largely likes the video, but feels like there are some places where she was pretty seriously misrepresented and feels like there are some serious red flags to put up. Question: how should she go about dealing with this? So hi everyone, welcome. We're doing 2 days in a row because I've been working for 2 weeks on legal analysis and you deserve it. I love y'all, you're great. Today we're actually going to be having another guest on here. I'd like to make this into a more regular sort of occurrence for the channel. Today we're going to be having probably a discussion. I'm just trying to predict how it's going to go. I'm thinking something similar to my discussion with Zoomer Nation yesterday. I'm going to be having on a creator. I'm going to have on a creator named Mo Stebbings, who made a video actually sort of commenting on my debate that I had. A couple weeks ago? I watched it. I commented. I largely liked the video. There are some parts of it which I feel I was misrepresented on, and there are some really big flags that I want to talk about. I reached out to Mo and I offered to bring them on, and they accepted. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring them up into the call. Hello? Mo, are you there? Mo, you left. Wait, come back. Hold on. Wait, why are you server muted? Hold on. Wait a second. Yeah, you're allowed to speak. View channel, speak. Mute members. Alright, then here's what I'm going to do. Because apparently, we tried this out earlier, and I thought that I had already fixed everything with that. Mo, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So right now we're in a public chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and call you, all right? So that we don't have other people interrupting us. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Mo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
All right, we got there.
Yay!
Yeah. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing just all right. So what time is it where you're at?
It's 9 in the morning.
Oh, wow. I drastically misread that. I thought you said it was going to be 9 p.m. Oh, wow. So you're just getting up for the day?
I thought it was, but I was very wrong.
Yeah. No, you're completely fine. As long as you're good and ready to, have a discussion?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I just have a couple preliminary issues. First, and I want to ask this. I saw the tweet that you posted with the person who harassed you about your gender. Are you doing all right? Are you all good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm kind of like I get that a lot, so it's fine.
Yeah, I was scrolling through and I just like took a glance through your Twitter as I was like getting ready to, have a conversation with
Mm,
you. And I noticed that and I just yeah, that's I mean, it's really hard because they invalidated you or they were trying to like say that you because you didn't transition yet or something like that.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and it's like yeah, I haven't been able to transition yet, so it's just really dumb as well because I'm planning to, but
okay, now I do want to because like I assumed going in just from your content. I know that part of your video was like I don't know, it might feel a little invalidating to ask like pronouns. If you are transitioning, can I like this
it's
is not
fine.
meant to invalidate you. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure. Can you tell me which pronouns are like good to use or like good to refer to you by?
They them is good.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I know you've talked a
Yeah.
little bit in some of your content about like the fact that you want to transition, but you're non-binary. That's something which is a
Yeah.
little which is more new to me. I don't know as many people who are non-binary who do medical transition. Although I know it's a thing. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, I don't have too much. Again, like I said before, like I commented, I largely like your video. I agree with a lot of things that are in it, and I think that like my first glance of you is that you're someone who's operating with like a good degree of good faith. So I definitely, I really appreciate that, and so I don't have like that many other preliminary issues to get to because usually I use
Hmm.
preliminary questions as like a way to suss out if someone is acting in good faith. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's too much of an issue because yeah, I don't know,
Hmm.
you seem like a pretty cool person. I'm hoping that this will go over like
Yay.
largely cordially. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hooray. Um, the last thing I just want to make sure, because you said that at the beginning of your video. So like, and this is just like a very basic thing. Like you watched the entirety of the debate between Mars and I, right?
Oh,
Like there's not like
yes,
any like
all
you
of
didn't
it.
just want like part you didn't just watch part of
No.
it and like not others, right?
Yeah, I watched it multiple times.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's what I got because I mean like at the beginning you said like oh it was by the time I finished analyzing this debate, which is over an hour long, I just watched so much footage that my ADHD brain was like, no, we're not. You're not watching anything else. And I was like, okay, so
Yeah.
okay, I just want to make sure before we go ahead and not like
Yeah.
if we get to a point where I'm like, hey, why didn't you mention this? And you're like, well, I actually didn't watch that, and I'm like, um,
Yeah.
okay. So the main thing I wanted to bring you on, there were a couple of places where I feel like where I mean like, and again, this is just me being honest. I feel like you misrepresented me a
Hmm.
little bit, and I've mentioned a couple of them. Some of them are small enough that they probably don't need to be discussed explicitly. The
Hmm.
main bit has to do with your discussion of Arielle's statement about gender not being a social construct. And if you don't mind, I'd just
Hmm.
like to go over what you said in your video so we can start from
Okay.
there.
Yep.
So, okay, cool. So at 9 minutes into your video, you said this. So one of the first things that Riley brings up is that Arielle is transphobic because she says that gender is not a social construct. You then played the clip from our debate. Then you
Hmm.
said, now I find this is a really weird point to bring up if I'm completely honest, because I think that there are quite a few instances of Arielle being transphobic, but I don't think that's one of them. I don't think
Mm.
that saying gender is not a social construct is transphobic in the slightest. Now, before you get offended, let me explain. Many people have different definitions of what gender is, and from what I can recall, neither Riley nor Mars really kind of explained what their definition was. If you see gender as a sort of amalgamation of all the different societal roles, expectations, and stereotypes, then yes, gender is a social construct. But if you see gender as a sort of intrinsic part of yourself, I don't know, something in your head perhaps, something separate from societal roles and sex, but intrinsic all the same, then no, gender would not be a social construct. And I don't think that
Mm.
makes you transphobic. Quite a few trans people have said that. I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah. Yeah, you did.
All right. Then you went on to play the clip from our debate about how
Hmm.
I showed that that was wrong by, according to scientific consensus. Like I cited all the major
Yeah.
major peer reviewed studies and like organizations that argue that gender is a social construct and that gender and sex
Yeah.
are different, right? The thing
Yeah.
I take a little issue with, I mean, like there are several points I want to talk about here, but
Yeah.
uh, I happened to notice that you actually cut out the clip that you showed right before I got to the argument for why Arielle was transphobic in saying this, even though you went on to argue why it wasn't transphobic. I want to go ahead and I want to read that clip from my video to make sure that there's the full context.
Okay.
So after the clip that you played finished, where it starts up is where I say this. So not only does she say directly contradicting, so not only does what she say directly contradict modern scientific consensus, but it is also transphobic because the act of saying this has a materially adverse effect on the lives of trans people. This is because if you normalize the idea that gender is not a social construct, then it must be a biological one, and that any trans person who claims to identify contrary to their assigned gender at birth is wrong or lying, which is what Ben Shapiro and others like him argue. Mm-hmm. So my first question is, why didn't you include that when you seem to make a big, like one of your main arguments in the video was that you disagreed with me on this point about Arielle being transphobic?
Okay, so I think there are probably two things. The first one, I guess I didn't see it as important, which obviously you think it is, but I guess the reason why I didn't is I don't think it's strictly either biological or social. I think, although I agree that gender is a social construct myself, because that's what all the organizations say, but I think a lot of people don't see it as biological or social. They see it as psychological. And so I think saying that gender is kind of like an intrinsic psychological kind of part of your brain or whatever, even if it's kind of wrong, it's not transphobic because you are saying it's different to sex.
So I want to unpack a little bit of that because there's a couple different points there. So first, you don't know. So the first thing that you said was that you didn't include this argument why I said it was transphobic because you didn't think it was important. That's what you're saying?
I guess so. I mean, like, I didn't mean to kind of like misrepresent anything. I think I was just kind of cutting down bits and was like, I think I assumed that it was kind of obvious, I guess. Like, if something's transphobic, the reason it's transphobic is because it harms trans people. So I don't know. I think that would be.
You said in your video that she wasn't transphobic for saying this. So can you go ahead and respond to the argument I did make? Because you didn't respond to my argument in the video that you made where you said that I was wrong or that you disagreed with me. So can you go ahead and respond to the argument that I actually made?
So is your question, why is Arielle saying that gender isn't a social construct? Why is that not transphobic?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Well, I mean, specifically responding to the argument I made. The argument that I made was that it's transphobic because it broadens this idea that if gender is not societally constructed, then it is biologically constructed. This is rhetoric that's used by all sorts of conservative people, like Arielle, like Ben Shapiro, and many others, to invalidate not only binary trans identity, but non-binary trans identity. So I don't so I don't understand why you would say that this is clearly, quote unquote, not an example of her being transphobic. Like, that's very confusing to me. And the confusion is compounded by the fact that you didn't include my main argument to that effect.
Yeah, so I think the reason I don't think it's transphobic is because I used to not think gender was a social construct. This was before I knew about kind of all the resources and stuff, but I thought it was a psychological thing. So I don't know, like I used to kind of be of the belief that, I don't know, your brain determines your gender and kind of well, I mean, I guess it still does, but the brain kind of studies, I guess. So I thought it was a psychological kind of thing. So I guess saying that gender is not a social construct, depending on the circumstance and what the person who's saying it is meaning. If they're like, gender is not a social construct, it's strictly biological and connected to sex, then that would be transphobic. But if you're saying gender's not a social construct, it's a psychological kind of thing, and sex is biological, then I wouldn't say that's transphobic. So I think my issue was that the statement gender is not a social construct is not inherently transphobic. Whether Arielle herself wasn't intending it in a transphobic way is probably a different question. But I guess that was my point.
Well, I guess that's actually something I want to ask you about, because like I do think like this is one of the reasons why I think that you are operating under a degree of good faith, because I'm inclined to agree with you. While I don't think that that mentality that you just elicited is like as scientifically, like it's not the one that's adopted by like the scientific consensus. I do think it's not like coming from a place of inherent transphobia, right? Like I understand the semantics of like what you're saying, but I want to like be clear. Like, do you really honestly think that's what Arielle was trying to say here? Like, this isn't a video, mind you, where she literally spent like the vast majority of it like just trashing on trans people. Do you really think that she like started out with like a statement trying to advocate for the identity of like non-passing or like trans people who just focus on like their internal identification? Like, is that genuinely what you think?
No, I think that wasn't the point I was trying to make as such. But I mean, obviously, I can't know Arielle's mind, but I don't have very positive hopes for Arielle and her transphobia. So,
well, I mean, like we can make pretty strong inferences on what she was trying to say there, right? Like she literally had a video where, I mean, like in both of us, mind you, like both of us were in a video talking about how Arielle is transphobic or a TERF or whatever, right? That just happened recently. That was really cool, right? And like the vast majority of that video went through like the entirety of like just this like 2.5 minute video that Arielle put out, and like how the vast majority of it was just like trashing on trans people. Like we can make a pretty strong assumption that she wasn't exactly trying to advocate for trans rights, right? Like we can make a pretty strong inference, right?
Yes.
So I want, so like when you say that, not only does it omit sort of my argument because you didn't include it, but like you assigned like can we or I won't ask you to necessarily agree with this, but like from where I'm sitting, it seems like you assigned way too much charitability to Arielle's statement. Like you're basically like it would be like trying to say like, oh yeah, no, I understand that you, Mr. Racist, probably aren't like actually hating on slavery or aren't actually hating on black people by trying to advocate for the economic benefits of slavery. No, you just care about the state. Like, no, this person is clearly a fucking bigot, right? Or at least that's where I'm coming from when I look at this. I can't see it another way.
I think I was kind of coming from it at a different angle, rather less of whether Arielle herself saying that was whether Arielle saying that was her being transphobic herself. And I guess I was looking at it whether or not that argument itself was transphobic, because I guess I don't see that argument as transphobic, but I do see Arielle as transphobic. So,
Right. I suppose the point that I want to, like, the point I'm trying to drive here is that, like, context matters a lot, right? I'm inclined to agree that, like, if we were to take that statement and put it in, like, an absolute pure vacuum, devoid of all other context, then I'm inclined to agree with you. Like that, okay, by itself, it's not necessarily transphobic, but we have to look at the context here, and we have to look at like the material effects that this kind of a statement has, especially coming from someone broadcasting to primarily a right-wing audience. She just had on someone who wore a MAGA hat just recently, and I'm sure that there are many other examples. Yeah, exactly, right? And this is someone who went on to like Steven Crowder. This is someone like went on to Dave Rubin, right? Like so many far right. Like her audience is far right. Like that's where she's at right now. She's just done the complete grift. So I think that like given the context, like that's an important reason why to look at this, an important reason why to recognize that like this is, I mean, again, to me, like a very explicit example of transphobia. That's kind of why I started out with it, was because it looked like this seems like the slam dunk. It's kind of like the same kind of slam dunk where it's like when someone references turfisaslur.com as a source, it's not exactly like there's not exactly, I don't feel like there has to be like such a substantive argument from me to point out to the audience who should be, or who I expect to be like largely reasonable people, to understand why this isn't the greatest thing, right?
I think the thing the reason I kind of criticized that so heavily was because I guess if you view it kind of, I don't know, I guess I can very easily see why Mars wouldn't see that statement as transphobic, because like you say, if it comes from someone who isn't Arielle, it probably isn't transphobic, you know? So I guess that was probably why I honed in on that point.
I mean, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, if it doesn't come from someone like Arielle, then I'd want to know like who it comes from. Like context always matters with these sort of statements, right?
Mhm.
I would always want to make sure that like I know, like if someone were to say this, then given
Mhm.
the way that that kind of statement has been heavily weaponized against the trans community by a lot of like far right talking pundits and whatever, I would want to
Mm.
get like an explicit statement from the person, like an explicit caveat being like, hey, just to be clear, I'm talking about it in this way, not this way. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
the only way I would string that and be like, okay, that seems at least reasonable.
Okay.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
reason why, so like the reason I brought this all up, and again, like I want to tie this back to the beginning. Like this isn't meant to like impugn your morality. Like I'm not trying, like this isn't like, that's not the angle I'm trying
Yeah.
to work here. But like it just makes me a little concerned about a couple other things that you said, and that's kind of like a theme that went through the video. Another thing
Okay.
that you said at 18 minutes into the video, this is where you talked about the clip from our discussion on biological sex. You
Mhm.
said the following. Now, I don't think it's fair to label Mars as a science denier. You just provided him with a source on the spot and expected him to change his views. If someone
Mhm.
presented to me a source on the spot, I'd probably say something like, okay, I hear what you're saying. My current position would be blah, 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 but I see you presented me with some reputable looking information. I'll have to go away and, I don't know, have a read of it and do some research myself. That's probably what I'd say. But I wouldn't just accept the source because there are so many studies available on the internet and a lot of them are complete bullshit. That's what you said, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, there's a couple things that I want to talk about here. Because, again, like, this is another place where I feel like you're assigning a lot of charitability. Like, a lot of charitability.
I
And
like to do that, which probably is a weakness on my spot, but I like to kind of, I don't know.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I get it. I just want to talk about, like, you know, the repercussions of it because, like, I get it. Like, I also come from a place where I want to assign people charitability, right? I also,
Yeah.
like, I understand that fundamental, like, want, like, that fundamental pull. We just have to be
Yeah.
reasonable because, like,
Mhm.
let's be clear, Mars, like, I think that the way that you just talked about, like the way that you just described, if Mars had responded like that in the middle of our debate, I think that would have gone over very differently than the way it did. I think that we would have had a great
Mhm.
discussion, right? Like, I'm all for
Mhm.
giving people an opportunity to be able to like read sources I provide or be able to talk about them. I offered during the debate, I
Mhm.
was like, hey, we can talk about this source. We can go over it as much as you want. Like, if you have any confusion, we can talk about it right now, right? And
Yeah.
he just turned it down for no reason other than he just didn't want to talk about it, right? If he had said what you recommended, it would have been a lot better. And I think that if you, like, if I were, I don't know, I don't have any sources I'm going to like pull out during the debate, but like if I did and you responded that way, then like that would be such a better conversation, right?
Mm.
But like he didn't act that way, right? And I think it's important to recognize that like if someone is just going to make it tough for me for the sake of being tough, then like I'm going to respond in the way that like I've been taught to throughout my years of debating, right? Like, I don't think that's
Mhm.
necessarily unreasonable for me to act that way, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Um, and another thing I want to talk about, and this is just like something that I was interested in discussing. So,
Yeah.
so I want to make sure I understand like your mentality with this. So, what you're saying is that like if you are presented with evidence which challenges a belief that you hold, that you would eventually read that information and then see if it challenges it. And if it does challenge your belief to the effect that like it's very reasonable and well founded and it completely, you know, defeats or whatever, it completely contradicts your view, whatever it is, that you would eventually realize like, okay, I was wrong. I'm going to just learn from this and move on, right? Like that's
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I
Mhm.
said, I used to didn't think that gender was a social construct, but then, you know, you read the evidence and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
you
yeah.
change your mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how long ago? I'm just asking because I can't remember off the top of my head. How long ago was my debate with Mars? Was it a week, and like a couple weeks? Like how long?
Um,
How long ago was it? Like 2 weeks? I'm trying to
yeah,
remember.
2 or 3 weeks, I think. A few
Okay.
weeks, yeah. 2 or 3. I can't quite remember.
During that time, has Mars come out with a video talking about how he had reviewed the evidence I presented him and how he actually determined that, oh shit, I was wrong about biological sex and I was wrong about gender. And I'm so sorry, trans community, for saying all these things and holding these beliefs. Like, did he ever release any of that sort of kind of video?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know. No.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I think we can safely assume no, but
well, I mean, I've looked through and I can tell you certifiably he's not. In fact, he's
yeah.
had on like outspoken transphobes like Blair White and Rose of Dawn. So, yeah, very much the opposite. Um, So yeah, like the point I'm trying to get at is that like I understand that you want to ascribe him a lot of good faith and charitability, but he's literally like if he had done even the same thing that you had ascribed to him to do, like even the same thing that you, being a good faith actor, would have gone out and done, like he hasn't done that to any effect. I gave him the evidence. You even agreed with me that it's pretty reputable in your video, and like he hasn't changed his mind. In fact, he's just kind of dug his heels in. So the reason I bring this up is because like he's not the person that you think he is, Mo. Like I really want to try and get that across.
I feel very kind of backstabby to go on here and trash talk him, as he's always been very nice to me. So like regardless of whether you think his views are kind of shitty,
I'm not trying to talk about, well, I mean, all right, this is actually sort of, I mean, like this is sort of important, right? And I'm not asking, like I'm not asking you to necessarily backstab him, right? I'm not trying to put you into like this position, right? But like this is something that I noticed from like your Twitter and like this video, and we'll only talk about this video because that's the only thing I asked you to talk about, right? But like I know that you, like you said in your video, like you consider Mars a friend, and like you've been on his show before, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And something that you said in your video, actually, I really would like to ask you about. So you said at 1 minute and 22 seconds in your video, now I'd guess that Riley would probably argue that Mars is transphobic, but just hold on to that because I'll be getting to stuff like that later in the video. You never actually talked about why Mars, in your opinion, was not transphobic. I was waiting for that. I heard that and I was like, oh, I want to hear this argument. And you never gave it. So can you give that argument? Like, can you tell me why you think he's not?
Well, I guess there's probably a few things. I doubt anything. I'll just say this here. I doubt anything I'm going to say here will change your mind. But I think I don't know. I think there are a few things to take into consideration. The first being, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I guess you can argue that some of the things he may believe kind of would be the type of things that transphobes typically would agree with more, but in the grand scheme of things, he is accepting of like trans people and transitioning, and he is accepting of non-binary people. Like, you know, he thinks I'm trans, he calls me by my pronouns. So I think labeling him as like a flat out transphobe, I can't get behind that. I can see why someone might criticize his specific beliefs and be like, I think those are transphobic, but I don't think you can, you know, label him as a transphobe and it be correct.
What's your definition of a transphobe then?
Well, I guess somebody who, you know, advocates against trans people or holds transphobic, I don't know, yeah.
Well, I mean, if it's someone who holds transphobes and like he has transphobic, or if it's someone who holds transphobic beliefs and by your own admission he has transphobic beliefs, then that seems to fit the bill, right? Again, I'm not trying to put you in the box. In fact, you don't need to answer this. Maybe I'll ask you a different question because I'm really trying to figure out how you think. What are your opinions on, because Mars recently had a stream, like very recently, where he talked for, I think it was like a couple hours with Blair White and Rose of Dawn. Do you consider either of them to be transphobic?
I think it's similar with Mars. I mean, like obviously, I just to make it clear, I don't have any love for like their beliefs. I think I have much more of a problem with Blair White than I do with Rose of Dawn. I made a video criticizing both of them, but with the Rose of Dawn video that I criticized, she messaged me and said that she thought some of my criticisms were good, and
did she actually change what she did after you made that criticism? It's interesting that she responded like thoughtfully. Did she actually change her content after you criticized her?
I don't really watch them on a regular basis, but I can probably pretty strongly suspect no.
Yeah, so like this is the thing, right? And this is sort of the reason why I want to talk to you about this, right? Is that like I want you to understand very clearly that
Mm-hmm.
this is not a good crowd to get mixed up in. And I looked at your Twitter, and I know that you even follow Rose of Dawn, and I know that you're very like, and I don't know like how close you are to her. Like I don't know the extent that you're close to
I've
her.
had like sent like 2 messages and she sent me 1, so no, we're not.
Yeah. Like I'm like I
Yeah.
just want to be clear that like, you know, I and again, I don't know the nature of the like the extent of your relationship with her or like with Mars or with any of the people of these crowd, but like this is not a good crowd to get mixed up in. And I think that what's happening here is that like you seem like someone who fundamentally does assign a lot of good faith and charitability to people that you're criticizing, which is an awesome quality. You seem like a stand-up, wonderful, wonderful person. And like that's the reason why I wanted you on here. And I'm really hoping we could be friends after this. But like my biggest fear is that like you end up taking like in the, and again, like I don't know why you assign charitability to them. Maybe you think you can win them over. Maybe there are some things that you fundamentally do agree with them on, which are probably not like the most popular takes in the trans community. Like I don't know what your reasoning is, but like just be aware that like there are a couple takes in this video, like the take that we talked about for a little bit, and like it seems like you've changed your stance on that, and that's a good take, right? Like that I would be like, yeah, cool, good shit. But like just be aware that like the more that you associate with these people and the more that you kind of like either try to engage, like not necessarily like you can engage with their beliefs all that you want, but like engage in them in such a way where it's like you're trying to be like friends with them. I want you to be aware of like 2 things that like very likely could happen that I'm very afraid of, right? The first is that like a lot of people like, because I mean like you're growing up, like, and I mean I am too, right? We're relatively small channels, like let's be real. We haven't really been put through the ringer in the way that a lot of larger content creators have been, right? So you know we can make a lot of mistakes, and you know there's not that big of a backlash that we will experience as creators, right? But like if you but like Mars and Blair White and Rose of Dawn, they're the kind of people who have takes that like the larger trans community just like outright admonishes because they are implicitly transphobic, at least according to like the vast majority consensus. That's the reason why they basically have like their own little club of, you know, channels, and they do like everything together and they feature each other as much as they possibly can because they have no one else to turn to, right? And I really don't want you to be to put yourself in a position where you're both criticized by the larger trans community, but then also like where you have this tenuous sort of relationship with these people and they're like, hey, I see you've been criticized a lot by like the majority trans community. So have we. Maybe you should get closer to us. Maybe you should start doing things that we want. Maybe you should start saying these things that we say that maybe, you know, you haven't thought about a lot, or maybe you haven't like developed hard opinions on, but maybe, you know, you want to just like join our club. Maybe you want to be like our token non-binary person. That's my big fear, right?
Yeah. I think I doubt that would happen simply because nothing kind of makes me more than being a token non-binary. And also I think I don't know, I think I like to engage with people I disagree with, because I feel like at the moment there is such a divide within the community. And although like I say I kind of typically agree a lot more with your beliefs, I think if nobody is willing to engage or be friends with these people who do have different views, then the divide's not going to kind of get smaller. You know, there's always going to be the divide if no one is willing to talk. But I see where you're coming from, and I think I don't have any worry of me becoming some kind of true scum trans medicalist crazy you know, I can't see that happening.
So I mean, like, and I definitely like I get the appeal of that idea. I just want you to all like I suppose that the main thing I want you to take away from this is like you can be ambitious. I think that's a very ambitious and a very like fundamentally altruistic sort of perspective to take. But like I want you to make sure that first that you're being careful, right? Like make sure that, you know, you are watching out for yourself, but also like remember to always act reasonably, right? Like we have at least 2 examples from this discussion, both Mars and from Rose of Dawn, where not only you criticized Rose of Dawn and Rose of Dawn responded and positively responded, but fundamentally didn't change her content. And then I criticized Mars and I criticized him in a lot of ways and he hasn't changed anything. I want you to understand that, like, I get the appeal of trying to change the minds of these other content creators. I just don't see it being that reasonable. Someone in my Twitter actually said it really well the other day, and I've been thinking about it a lot, right? Where YouTube really isn't about like fun, like sometimes there's some interaction between different communities, but fundamentally it's about people who largely try to argue to their own echo chambers. Now I do agree fundamentally, like that's not great and that's like a very messed up system, but like it does go to the effect that like it's so hard to actually change someone's mind, because not only on this platform, like it's easier to change like people who watch, like viewers, it's a little easier because they don't have like a viewer base to appeal to. But when you have someone who has like a platform they built up on like a very specific set of ideas, and you basically challenge the basis of those ideas, they're not going to change their idea. Or if it is, it's like the hardest thing to do. The only example of this, and this is why I have to say that it's not impossible, the only example of this is Hunter Avalon, who went against giant
Massive
monetary exactly. But like the reason why we celebrated that a ton is because it's just so unreasonable to expect that. And even before then, he had like a wide reputation of having like very nuanced takes within like the sort of right community, right being like politically right. Like he had a sort of like predisposed reputation where he was going to entertain more nuanced thought. When we're talking about Blair White, Rose of Dawn, Transbra, whatever, like they are not engaging in nuanced thought. They're like they parrot the same basic three ideas. That's why they're able to like basically collaborate on whatever content they do. Right. So I want you to just be aware that like I get the idea of trying to change these people's minds, but just be aware that realistically that's probably not going to get you what you want. You're probably going to end up spinning your wheels a lot, and that it might be better served for you to do your like spend your time making other content. I don't know, like talk about like literally anything else. Talk about your experience as non-binary person. Talk about like your life or like other there's so much stuff you can do, and I don't want to say what you do, right? Like there, you know, the it's a giant sea and there's fish and yada yada. I don't know where I was going with that.
I think it's not just about bridging the divide between them, because the people who watch them, I guess they're primarily either kind of right-wing people or kind of like other trans people who agree with what they're saying. And I think if somebody who kind of shares their views and is trans can come across one of my videos and then kind of see that and be like, oh, maybe I was wrong. And then so we're bridging the divide in the community, whether it's with these big figures or not. So like I guess while I criticize them, it's because they're kind of a perfect example of these views. And so I guess part of it is so maybe they can see it, but I guess the majority of it is so that other people can see it. Yeah.
All right. And I can, like, again, like, I'm not going to tell you what to make. So, like, if you think that you can thread that line, then, you know, go ahead. Just, I want you to make sure. I just want you to make sure that, like, understand that that is playing with some fire. Because, like, the largest danger that you can run into in engaging with their ideas is to eventually start commingling your ideas with theirs until the point where it's hard to tell where they begin and you end. Right?
That's a fair criticism, yeah.
So, just, like, again, do what you want. I like my biggest hope is that like a year or two from now that I'm not criticizing you for being like the next wannabe Blair White but non-binary.
Oh God, no, never.
Yeah, just like
I think we fundamentally disagree on far too much for that ever to happen.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's really the main point I wanted to get across.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that was kind of I just kind of made the video, I guess, and I didn't know if anything would come of it, but yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. Do you want to like shout out your social media, your YouTube, whatever?
Oh yeah. Sure. So my YouTube channel is just Mo Stebbings, like in the title, and my kind of Instagram and Twitter are Cops Hate Mo.
Wait, what's the I have to ask the question, why is it Cops Hate Mo?
Okay, so story time. So when I was 16, I started getting into street art, and this was like before I came out and everything. So I was still going by my birth name, and my alias, I guess, was Mo. And I went. So I used to go around just kind of doing little street art around the town. One of my paintings got in the newspaper, which was cool. But one day I was painting underneath a bridge, and this policeman he comes and walks past, and he looks down and he sees me just under the bridge, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, hi." And then he was like, "It's dangerous down there." And I was like, "Okay." And then he sees that I'm painting, and he's like, "Are you painting?" And I was like, "Yep." And then he just walked away. So yeah, that's
Oh my god, that's hilarious. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, hey, thank you for so much coming on, and yeah, let's talk
Okay.
again sometime. All right.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
That was a good talk. All right. How are y'all doing? How are y'all doing? Are y'all chilling? Are y'all vibing right now? Oh wow, 50 viewers. Hey, what's up? How's it going, fam? I'm gonna read some comments just so I can catch up with chat again. Like, I'm so sorry, chat. If there are comments that come up, then like this is, I don't know, like if people want to donate or comment right now for me to be able to see it, like right now while we're sort of in between clips is probably the best time to. Just because like when I'm in the middle of it, I'm focusing on what I do, right? Like I'm in the zone, so I want to make sure that like I know what I'm doing substantively, right? So fantastic. Wish I had a cool backstory for it. Hey, listen, like there's enough time. Go out and make one. You're allowed to. Everyone has their own self-interest, which causes cognitive dissonance. So even if they agree, can't accept it. Also, it's safer to agree with the right instead of the left. Oh yeah, like generally speaking, like a lot of people, like it's really like fundamentally, right? Like if we want to talk about like where people come from fundamentally, like as far as like their own personal perspectives, when they're engaging in politics, right? If you have someone who's like mainstream and someone who's like the average cis white person, and I'm only like I'm not saying that hatefully, I'm not saying that like in any sort of like implicitly negative way towards these people or towards you or I like. In a lot of ways, like I'm a pretty average person, right? But like when you are a pretty, like statistically speaking, when you are a largely average person and life is decently comfortable for you, it is much easier to fall in a more conservative mindset where that means that life doesn't really change, right? Because if life is already pretty comfortable for you, then there's really no incentive to change. In fact, there's a disincentive against changing, right? Because changing might introduce a danger of the unknown. And the danger, when we're talking about like issues related to, let's say, immigration, right? Like people always want to blow up the effects of immigration, be like, it's going to destroy the economy and it's going to take away all of our jobs. When in fact, like all major scientific evidence shows that like it's just doesn't work like that. In fact, most of the time it improves the economy and the standard wage for like everyone in the economy except for like people who are high school dropouts, right? Like that's a really good example. The financial incentive to maintain the grift / genuine platform is also a problem, whether or not cognitive dissonance is always actively occurring. Yeah, right. And I didn't hammer on that too much because like that probably does not exist as much with Mars, but like Arielle Scarcella, Blair White, Rose of Dawn, absolutely. Like those people 100,000% have a financial incentive to keep doing the work that they do, right? Mars, he's on his way there, I'm sure. I'm sure that there are some people who donate to him because he says the things that he wants them to. But like those people, abso-fucking-lutely. Yeah. All right, so chat, I need your advice because that was the main planned content for today. Now, there are two other things I could talk about a little bit. The first being sort of like the drama with Contrapoints in her video, and the other relating to what was his name? I just talked about it a moment ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember this. Ahmaud Arbery, right? Because I actually have some thoughts on that. I just watched Vosh's video on that a moment ago. So like if people want to like vote for a second on like which they would prefer, I would drink some tea, but honestly, I'm really hot right now, so I need to get a glass of cold water. So, like, put in the chat what you would want. Contrapoints or Ahmaud Arbery, and I will, based on like the majority response in chat, I will go with whatever topic is like the most popular. All right, so I will be right back. Hello. All right, let me look at the chat. Let's see. Contrary. Contra. Oh, Contra drama is tired already. I should have done a one or two. Listen, when I go website, then I'll just be able to like let people create polls, and that will make life easier. Contra is a palette cleanser. Oh my god. Emma. The first thing I want, I don't know if anyone is able to do this, but like what I want for my Discord and for my channel, I would like how Vosh has like the dicks emote. I want something like that, but instead of dicks, it says mouthfeel with like trans pride colors across. Like that's what I want. If someone can make like an animated version of that and send it to me on my Discord, you would be the greatest. Let's see. Emma Ross, Contra, let's see. You got me. Contra, very nuanced topic and it's all fucked up. Well, I mean, like, I think I have a pretty nuanced take on that. So actually that might be, I mean, like, I definitely want to talk about it a little bit, right? At least as far as like Vosh's take, like I can add a little bit to that as far as like everyone's talking about like the relevance of the fact that, you know, there's like more camera footage that this person had apparently like gone into these premises on like multiple times before. The TLDR, that doesn't fucking matter. Like, common law murder is like pretty straightforward and there's no like justification defense that includes any relevant aspect of any of that. No thanks. Already did that. Sorry. Contra team. All right. Doing Contra. All right. We're doing Contra. All right. So let's go ahead and bring up, I'm just going to use Xander Hall's video because Xander Hall got like basically the same little quote that I want to talk about and the same thing from Twitter, right? I saw it in a very different way that he did, though. Let's see. This is where we've come to, fam. We're reacting to a reactor, reacting to content. We're like several layers of reaction in. It's it is reactionception. This is what we've come to. But it's fine. It's fun. It's all in good fun. Right? So, let's see. So, effectively where we find ourselves is we find ourselves with this kind of tweet, right? So where we find ourselves is a tweet by this person named Kylie, and I'll just read it. I'm not going to characterize it beyond what Xander Hall has done. // CW transphobia. Show me proof that Contrapoints was being transphobic instead of taking an hour-long video out of context. Hi, here's your proof. Feel free to disregard that, though, through and argue in the replies over someone's disgusting, bigoted comments because you like them. Actually, you know what? Here, let me, instead of playing his video, because, like, it feels, like, a little weird. I'll do it if I have to, but, like, can someone link me? Can someone link me this tweet? And that might be a better way to go about doing this. Also, you saw my debate doc. I researched before all of my debates. Listen. Oh. Here we are. Okay. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Or is it already deleted? I would be extremely sad if it already was. I mean, I guess not extremely sad. I don't know. If people want to post things and then take them down after the fact as a way to, like, you know, try to you know, recant a certain point that they made earlier on, then I guess that's fine. 12 hours. If someone is able to link me the tweet, that would also be very, very helpful. There's a lot of She-Ra stuff in here. I still need to watch that. That's actually pretty cool. Nothing really negative to say about that. Yeah, so far all this is fine. Where is this? Nope. All right. Let's try something else. Can I search this person's Twitter? Whatever. All right, we're just going to watch the clip that Xander Hall plays on his video because it's easier.
Somehow this is context. Let's go ahead and watch this video and see if it's problematic. I'm ready.
Nothing has ever triggered this kind of in-group embarrassment more from me than a cringe video that went viral last year in which a masculine trans woman throws a tantrum over being misgendered in a GameStop.
You're gonna give me my fucking money back.
Excuse me, sir. There's a young man in here.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
This video is excruciating for me to watch.
Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir. I apologize. Motherfucker. I apologize now.
The paradoxical absurdity of trying to brutishly intimidate people into seeing you as a woman.
Ooh.
Now Twitter's gonna come for me over this and say Natalie hates trans women who don't.
She always...
Yeah, and Xander Hall appropriately recognized that. Like, she always calls it out, right? But yeah, this is basically the clip that people seem to sort of be losing it on. We already got it. We already got basically what I wanted to. So let's talk about this, right? Oh, and thank you for finding it. I'm so, again, like, next. All right, listen, we'll figure out how to get it so that you'll be able to send it to me easier. The best place is probably at this point my Discord, which there's a link below, so totally join if you haven't. But the main point I want to talk about with this video, now Xander Hall goes on to make an argument, and you know that argument is all well and good, and I don't want to take words out of his mouth, so you can go and watch it yourself. I want to address probably the best faith kind of interpretation of this person's argument, or at least the sentiment, right? The way that I see it, right? Like if you're trying to, and again, maybe I'm pulling a Ahmaud Stebbings here. I'm going to ascribe the most charitability to people who criticize Contrapoints and then respond to that type of a criticism. All right? Because like when we're talking about like people, all right, so like I had a conversation the other day with Zoomer Nation where there's a lot of people, like there's a lot of different factions on the left, right? Or like little different subgroups. And one of them, people like, again, like, and this is sometimes like some people consider to like be a negative term or like a negative way to put this, but there are some people who would be called woke scolds or wokelets, right? And this is who I think like Xander Hall, I can't remember if he specifically refers to this person as a woke scold or a wokelet. Like I can't remember from the video, but like that's what probably people from his point of view would describe these people as, right? I think that there's some truth to the idea that there are people on the left who just want to see larger content creators burn, right? Because of some personal grievances. I think that there's probably some truth to that, but I don't want that to obfuscate the inherent point, like any inherent truth that does reside in their arguments, right? Like I do want to respond to them. And I think that the most charitable, good faith way to take this person's tweet is to say that this is very similar to like a Martin Luther King Jr. white moderate take, right? Where it's a criticism against Contra for trying to promote something like respectability politics. Given the context in this video, it can seem a lot like Contra is trying to promote this idea that, well, if you want to demand like certain types of privileges or you want to demand certain rights or recognition that would be expected or given to the average person, then you have to be a good little soldier and you have to not speak up or be so brutish, right? I think that's one way that a person could reasonably string this criticism and actually be operating from a position of like decently good faith, right? I can see that. The problem here, and again, like this is a very nuanced discussion, because I don't think that this is all black and white. Ultimately, I think I do, like, ultimately, I will say, like, right here, just to put a clarification, I like the majority of this video. I think it's good. I think it has a lot of really good points. You should watch it, like, subscribe, all that. All right. I think that it's largely, like, a really good piece in that she did a wonderful job. And Natalie, like, please date me. No, but we are both in Baltimore, so, like, hit me up sometime. But anyway, enough standing for Contra so she dates me. Anyway, so the point though is that like I think that this is one way where you could string this line of thought, where you could string this kind of criticism where it actually is coming from a place of genuine concern, right? Because to someone who isn't picking up on a little bit more of the nuance, I think it does sound a little bit like, hey, you need to not be so angry and so demanding of rights and to be recognized for who you are from this other person, from this stranger, right? I can get that. No shame. I can get that feeling if you're watching this, right? Like, I think that's not an unreasonable take from the video. The problem with that take is, or at least this is the problem that I would have with it, is that here I would draw a distinction between, let's say, violent and non-violent protest, all right? In a lot of ways, we can think in, like, if we want to keep using MLK as, like, a person to talk about, we can talk about, like, the difference between, say, MLK and, like, Malcolm X, right? Where they both fundamentally had the same kind of ideas, but had different ways for affecting them. Malcolm X was like, yeah, violence is fine in order to affect, you know, meaningful social change. Like, people aren't going to listen otherwise. I think that's I think that's understandable. I see a lot of similarities between his beliefs and, say, like, Antifa nowadays. And, like, I'm not going to morally impugn that, right? I think that it's not as effective, though. And the reason why is because at the end of the day, whenever you use violence, and this is the reason why I have, not grievances with Antifa, I don't know. I shouldn't say anything about them because otherwise it'll be used against me until the end of time in any possible political career. So I'm not going to say much about it at all. I apologize. But understand, generally speaking, that if you use violence as a way to meaningfully affect change socially, even if it is justified, even if it is totally justified, it will be weaponized against you. And that's sort of what happened here, where the person I think had like a reasonable grievance against this store clerk, where for not for misgendering her, right? Like I think that there's a very reasonable grievance, and I think that a lot of us who are trans can completely sympathize with that. But there's a good way to go about doing that. And that doesn't mean just like being respectable and being a good little girl and, doing everything that you're told and not complaining or raising your voice, but raising your voice in a way which won't be taken, which won't be construed by people to be violent, to be used against you, right? I want to make sure that, because I mean, like, I'm totally fine. Like, I've gotten involved in like protests before, and I've been like, I've done that, right? Like, I did that a lot when I was in Memphis, and I've done that a lot at various places throughout the country. Like, I've been there, I've done that shit, right? And it's a great way to meaningfully affect change. We just have to be careful. Like, we just have to be careful, especially since we're operating from a place of minority status in society, that we make sure that we don't do it in such a way which will be weaponized against us. This is not to say, again, like heavy caveat, this is not to say that we should just pull the white moderate and just try to be as respectable and do whatever and just do what we're told, right? That's not what I'm saying. All right, this is sort of where the nuance comes into the discussion. What I am saying right now is that we need to make sure that we are affecting change, that we are protesting, that we are engaging in civil advocacy in such a way which is both effective as far as being able to accomplish our goals, and which won't be used against us and won't be counterintuitive to our actions. That's all, right? If we want to talk about Antifa, and mind you, for people who are going to be coming through my content in the future when I do run for political office, this is not an endorsement of Antifa. So do with that what you will. One thing that I really liked recently was that, I can't remember the context of the article, but there was like a Antifa syndicate that was being discussed. I can't remember where or the specifics, so other people can drudge it up after me. But there was like conversations about an Antifa syndicate. I think that Vosh was talking with someone about this, right? Where they had actually infiltrated a far-right group and organization and had gotten like enough information about them to be able to expose like their fascist or far-right leanings, right? That is so awesome, right? And it's so meaningful. Yeah, based as fuck, right? No, like that's the whole point, right? Is that like it's both nonviolent, like it can't be used against them, and it's so effective at like getting the change that you want. It's such a great way to operate, and that's just thinking the step ahead to make sure that you're able to accomplish not only the goals that you want to seek, but that you're making sure to do so in such a way that won't harm your cause or the rest of the people in your cause, right? That's the main thing. So with the Contrapoints video, there's a lot of really good about it. The only other thing, no, mind you, that's one criticism that I wanted to address with this video. There's actually one other that I want to talk about real quick. And it's the fact that, oh my God, I didn't even realize this. So I'm not going to bring up the specific clip because I didn't look it up before time because I'm lazy. I'm sorry. Or I'm at least, I was focusing on talking with Mo. One other thing that I want to be like, this is actually like this. So whereas before that was defensive Contrapoints, this is an overt criticism. All right. And Contra, if you're watching this, don't hate me. Please hate me still. But anyway, so the important point of this is that there was something where I feel like she definitely could have easily fixed like a small issue that she had later on. And my issue, and this isn't something that's being talked about a lot with other people, but something which is very acute to me, is the fact that at a certain point in the video, she had a clip where this was at the point in the discussion where she was talking about Rose of Dawn, right? Where she was talking about all the examples where Rose of Dawn was just like, I think that the like basically obsessing over the person that they were talking about, right? There was one point where they played a clip where it was Rose of Dawn in a stream call with Blair White and another person who wasn't talked about directly in the video. And that person was Transbra, was Mars. Even though he only was featured in the video for a whole of a couple seconds, it was enough for him to literally less than a couple hours later go out and make an entire video about the fact that he was mentioned in a Contrapoints vid. And just to hammer the point of how popular this video has gotten, it's literally the first recommended video in my stream chat, or in my recommended feed. It's literally the first one there. I didn't even plan for that. And it already has 2,500 views for a channel with less than 1,000 subscribers. I'm not watching it. Don't watch it. Don't give him the time. Don't give him the viewer. Don't give him the viewership. Don't make him bigger. But he's also, I think, grown 200 subscribers, 1 to 200 subscribers over the past couple days. Yeah. That's a problem, not with necessarily the argument that she made, but the way that she did it. Because, and of course, she's such a big creator that this probably does not affect her. And, she, I don't think that she would necessarily think about this in, the post-editing process. But I need people to understand. If we learned anything from the past presidential election, any publicity is good publicity, okay? Anytime you're able to expose yourself, anytime you're able to make yourself more well-known, and I might be contributing to this as well. I might very well be contributing to that problem right now, so if people want to criticize me for that, then I think that's absolutely fair to do in this context, but I want to talk about it so that we don't make the same mistake again. When we are making content, and especially when we are considering who to criticize, we always need to remember how YouTube, how social media works, and what the consequences are of how we present our arguments, who we reference, who we give a platform to. By virtue of just referencing this person for 10 seconds in her video, he's gotten so much more exposure that he just would not have gotten otherwise, right? And this was such an easy thing for her to fix. She could have literally just cut him out of the frame, and that would have been it. That would have just solved the issue. But she didn't. And it's such an easy thing, and he wasn't even a part of the argument, and he didn't need to be there to begin with. He was completely irrelevant, to the discussion that she was having. This was just a fuck up. And to her, it's not going to seem like a big fuck up. But when you're talking about someone who, mind you, earlier in this same stream, we had also talked about literally platforms transphobia and platforms people like Blair White, like Rose of Dawn, like other transmedicalists or True Scum or whatever on this channel. When you have someone like that, it is not a good thing to platform them. All right? It is not a good thing. Or if you are, and this is a big if, because I engage in this too, if you are, to make sure that you are overtly critical of them. To make sure that if other people are exposed to their content, then they're done so by putting a giant warning label on the cigarette package, right? That's something that is essential to be done. Because otherwise, you are just introducing a massive amount of people. And again, maybe it's only 1% of the people who watch her. Maybe it's only 1%. Well, how many views does she have? Actually, you know what? Hold on. We don't even have to guess. Let's just take a guess. Okay. I want people in chat to guess. I want people in chat to guess before I show it. How many views do you think that her video already has? How many views do you think that her newest video already has? Take a guess, type it in chat, do whatever you want. I'm going to show it in 3, 2, 1. Over 1 million views. Over 1 million. Let's do some quick maths. What's 1 million times 1%? If literally just 1% of her audience went and watched Mars's content because of this, that would be an additional 10,000 fucking views. 10,000. When we're talking about someone that's with as large a platform as this, shit's real. Shit's incredibly real. So, yeah, this is not a good play, Natalie. And it sucks because the rest of the video is honestly really good. And I really liked it. And I really wanted to be a part of it. Please someday. But this is a problem. and there's nothing that can be done about it right now. I think that bringing more attention to it beyond this is only going to be counterintuitive. So I just want you to be aware, if you ever do happen to watch this, like if you do, and again, that's a big if, I know that you're a busy person, but like be more careful about this kind of stuff, okay? Like this is a really, like it's a decently substantive problem, especially when you consider the fact that like this also has to do with the problem of opportunity cost. Not only did you end up giving someone with very bad ideas a platform, but you did that at the opportunity cost of not giving other people a platform. He's someone who's just like a couple hundred subscribers behind me, and I would be willing, I'm just gonna like talk myself up here, but this could apply to other people as well. I would probably do better with those viewers, right? Actually advocating for like decent social ideas and whatever. It's just a lot of bad, right? Like, not only are you giving someone else who doesn't deserve it more viewership, like either intentionally or otherwise. I shouldn't say that, like very unintentionally probably. But like it also comes at the opportunity cost of not including someone else there who probably does better deserve that viewership. Because you are a large creator. You literally have 1 million views on your video. Congrats. It's an awesome job. It's an awesome video. Please don't make that mistake in the future. That's all. Why do you want to be a part of it? I'm just saying like generally, right? It doesn't have to be like a place where I'm being like overtly criticized, right? Oh, holy shit. Also, I didn't even realize. Can I move? Ah, crap. Camera. Hey, there I am. That's cool. I just Googled Contrapoints. Apparently I came up. Of course, I'm looking at it through like my YouTube. So of course I'm going to come up on my own search history, but that's cool. That's neat. Yeah, that's all I got for the Contrapoints video. I don't know. Natalie didn't mention Trans Bra by name, so I don't think folks would seek him out. I think it's more likely that Contra signal boosted Rose of Dawn. Oh yeah, no, that's certainly true. I think that's absolutely true, right? But like, let's just be real. Like, even if it was like, I don't think that it was like the biggest signal boost, but like he literally put out a video less than 5 hours after, and he got like more views on that than like any of his other videos combined, or not all of them combined, but like any of his other recent videos by like a giant margin, right? Like that's no mistake. That like there's giant, like one literally correlates with the other or causes the other. Like it's a very high likelihood that one caused the other, right? It's not like they just exist in the vacuum. All right, that's all I got on Contrapoints. Otherwise, her video's great. Go watch it. Subscribe if you haven't. Although I'm willing to bet that probably the entirety of my audience is already subscribed to her, just making a general guess. Yeah. All right. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm not sure how formal this has to be. The last thing that I want to talk about is, oh, I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name. Ahmaud Arbery. All right. So earlier, and mind you, I was not preparing to necessarily do this. This is actually a very on the spot. So I don't know if this will get made into a video, but I definitely had thoughts, and actually this was very pertinent to the discussion. Like I think that I can contribute a decent amount of conversation to this subject because it is a lot more nuanced, right? It's a lot more nuanced, and like it's a very kind of touchy subject with a lot of people, but like I can approach this at least from the lens of someone who just took criminal law and talk about like the relevance of a lot of recent discussion. I'm going to give a caveat here that I am basing what I'm talking about on the information in Vosh's video. All right. If I misrepresent anything, then I don't know, blame him. I'm just going off of what he said in his video as far as like information for me to be able to talk about, right? So to summarize, right, at least to the furthest extent that I understand it, you had a man named Ahmaud Arbery. He's a black guy. He lived in the neighborhood and he frequented that neighborhood. There was a abandoned premise where people originally said that he had allegedly frequented and had possibly stolen something from. there was a group of a couple guys who got together and drove around and looked for Ahmaud Arbery after suspecting vaguely that he stole something without any evidence that they produced at the time. They just sort of thought it was him. And after finding him on the street, they murdered him. Specifically, two of the people did, like 2 men, and then one person who was recording. Which is not great. It's really, really not. I'm about to talk a little bit about the law, or at least what I learned in my criminal law class. As I have said before on my channel, I have to be very careful because while I know the law, I am not bar certified, and I have to make sure that I do not give any legal advice or come to any legal conclusions. The way that I am able to do this is by talking purely from the perspective with the heavy caveat that I'm only talking about what I learned in my class, and I'm only speaking in the abstract, hypothetically. So the only other fact that I'm going to talk about with the Ahmaud Arbery case is the fact that apparently a lot of people have been making videos, a lot of very far-right creators, like Tim Pool, Catholic Hangout. Also, if anyone knows anything about that, like, please tell me. I have no fucking clue. And other people like that, right? I think The Quartering made a video about the fact that there's now released video footage of Ahmaud Arbery having gone into these various abandoned premises on like multiple prior occasions, right? This was not necessarily produced at the initial sort of discovery process, but was discovered later. That's all I'm going to talk about, the specific facts related to there. Now we're going to talk hypothetically, and we're going to talk about what I learned in class, and we're going to have a little story time. So this is my outline from criminal law. It has everything that I learned in the entire class. It's tabbed very, very nicely. I'm very proud of it, actually. And I'm going to tell you all a little story. And the story is called What I Learned About the Common Law Elements of Murder. The common law elements of murder and involuntary manslaughter are 1. The unlawful. 2. Killing. 3. Of another. With malice of forethought. All right? I'll repeat that again just so that we're all clear, all right? It's a very, very simple definition. It's the unlawful killing of another with malice of forethought. Malice of forethought is a little bit of a term of art. It has a lot of different possible meanings. Here are some of them. It can mean that you act with the intent to kill a person other than the victim, which would be transferred intent. You act with the knowledge that what you do would kill your victim. You act with the intent to inflict grievous bodily harm to your victim. You act with the knowledge that he would inflict grievous bodily harm, or that you would inflict grievous bodily harm, or that you act with a depraved heart, or just an extreme indifference to human life, such that you well should have known that what you were going to do would have killed someone. Or felony murder, which is to say that you had the other elements and you did all those elements in the course of committing a felony, like armed robbery. Murder is really sort of black and white at the end of it. So here are some interesting insights about it. If you have a police officer, they're not on duty, and they're only allowed to take someone's life, other defenses absent, if they are on duty. Let's say that you walk into an office. This is a much more extreme example, but like I remember this from my semester, so I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. Let's say that you walk into your office and you're just like finished with your office. You're finished with your job. And let's say that you bring a gun with you and you start waving it around and you're just about to have like a mental break and be like, all right, everyone, don't make me do anything crazy. You don't have any necessary plans, but you're bringing a gun into there. And let's say that while you're waving your gun up in the air, you end up pulling the trigger and shooting someone on the floor above you. That's probably still murder. Because even if you didn't act with the intention of killing a specific person, you probably acted with a depraved heart. Let's talk about a very unfortunate example. This was actually, I believe, an example from a case that we read about. Let's say that you had a kid. And let's say that this kid is going to a high school dance with his friends. And let's say that this kid wants to show everyone that he's super cool, all right? That he's just like a really edgy kid. I don't know, let's say this is like middle school even, you know, where the kids are like super edgy, right? So he decides to bring a gun with him. And he goes into the guy's bathroom with all of his guy pals, and they maybe had a bit to drink. Maybe they snuck in some alcohol. And they start playing with the gun. And let's say that this kid, in the course of handling this gun, even though he never meant to hurt anyone, ends up accidentally pulling the trigger and shooting someone and killing them. If a prosecutor wanted to be really mean to that kid, you could probably charge him, hypothetically, with murder. So, speaking hypothetically, if you had 3 guys who were just going around and hypothetically looking for some black guy who they think stole from them, but didn't otherwise have any evidence to do so, and then those 3 people found a random black person and decided to kill him in the street without any authority to do so, that's murder. Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically. Now let's say, hypothetically, that these 3 people then tried to claim some sort of defense, right? Let's say, oh, you know, we were justified in doing what we did. Oh, we had reason to do this. Oh, you know, we were totally... Well, something else that I learned about in my criminal law class is that there are a very specific subset of justification defenses to be able to use to, if not get entirely out of a murder claim, charge, if not to be able to get entirely out of a murder charge, to at least be able to reduce the sentence or reduce the severity of the charge against you. The first place to start, and this isn't exactly a justification defense per se, but it's more just trying to get it mitigated entirely, is to try and argue a defense or argue that actually you acted involuntarily in the act of involuntary manslaughter. That has the same basic 3 elements, an unlawful killing of another with malice aforethought. But what's important to recognize is that the difference is that involuntary manslaughter is not murder alongside malice aforethought, right? It has a different mens rea. It has the intention, or it rather is to act with such a mental capacity as, let's say that you are acting with such a very, very outlandish emotional motivation that you acted in a reasonable way compared to how any other person would have acted in the same circumstance. Some examples that people try to use in order, like in these types of cases, is like, and again, like this is terrible, but this is like an example of how this gets brought up in court. Let's say that you have, I don't know whether to make this a husband or a wife. It doesn't really matter either way, but I know that there are like different narratives that can be spun with each. So let's just say a wife, all right? Let's say that a wife comes home. Oh, there are a couple different ways. All right, I'm going to go through a couple different hypotheticals. So the first hypothetical is that like a wife comes home, she's married to a husband, and she comes home and she sees that the husband is sleeping with another woman. She freaks the fuck out, gets like a knife or a gun and kills both of them, there might be a good chance that she could say, Your Honor, I didn't act with malice of forethought. I was just like I know that what I did was wrong in killing them, but I also know that like I was acting under like such an extreme emotional stimulus that I acted the way that any other reasonable person would. There's a good argument that she could get her charge reduced to involuntary manslaughter. Another example where this is normally brought up, unfortunately, and trigger warning, content warning, abuse. This unfortunately comes up a lot in instances where you have spouses, especially wives, who are abused by their husbands and who are regularly subjected to physical abuse and emotional abuse, and they aren't really able to do anything to get out of their circumstances except for to kill their husbands. These are particularly troubling kinds of circumstances. They're really, really not great. And they're hard because like judges want to sympathize with these people, but ultimately they still took a life. And so the law kind of ties their hands. It's really sad. That's involuntary manslaughter. All right. And then beyond that, there are a couple very specific justification defenses. That's where you say, I know what I did was wrong, but I had a valid reason for doing so. The first is necessity and self-defense. All right? Necessity is where it has a lot of elements, all right? But as I learned about it in my criminal law class, necessity can provide a full defense in circumstances where a defendant's crime is reasonably calculated to prevent an imminent greater harm, and can provide a full defense where, and this is a lot, so stay with me, 1, by virtue of all the circumstances. 2, not a defendant's intentional, knowing, or reckless creation. 3, there is an immediate. And 4, emerging threat. 5, of significant harm. And 6, defendant commits a crime. 7, that is reasonably likely to prevent harm. And 8, the harm caused by his crime is substantially less than the harm prevented. And 9, the defendant had no lawful or reasonable alternative. 10, of which he was or should have been aware. Then you can commit a crime. The standard example of this is like the trolley example. All right, if anyone has taken a philosophy class on like the trolley example, a great example is like, let's say that you were, like just to go over the example, right, for people who aren't aware, let's say that you're next to a trolley, all right, and you see that the trolley is coming and that if you let it keep going, then like if it keeps going on the track that it's on, then it'll kill one person. But if you pull, or that'll kill 10 people, all right, if it keeps going on the track that it's going, then it'll kill 10 people. All right, you are able to pull a lever. But if you pull the lever, then it's going to change the trolley onto a different track where it's going to kill one person. All right, this is an example where at least the law is going to say, hypothetically, according to this hypothetical, we're all speaking hypothetically here, we're just talking about what I learned in my class. The law would say that you are able to pull that lever. Because even though technically what you're doing is an action which is going to result in someone's life dying, at least someone different from who was initially intended, there wasn't really any alternative given to you, or at least none that you reasonably knew about in the circumstances, and you were able to save more lives than you ended. That's an example of that sort of defense. Self-defense is a special case of necessity that covers the use of deadly force against a person engaged in an unlawful use of force that threatens the life of another. The elements of a common law excuse of self-defense are where 1, the defendant actually, 2, and reasonably believes that the victim is in or is threatening to engage in, 3, the unlawful, 4, use of force, 5, that poses a risk of death or severe bodily harm to the defendant or a third party. 6, that it's imminent. 7, the defendant did not initiate the confrontation with the victim. 8, the defendant uses force, that is 9, reasonable, and 10, necessary to terminate the threat. And 11, there is no reasonable opportunity to escape or to escape, or defendant was not aware of a reasonable opportunity to escape. So let's be clear. An example of this would be where if you, and again, like the morale, like we're not talking about necessarily what's morally just in the circumstance. We're talking about what the law says. Let's say that you are walking down the street and someone comes up to you and pulls a knife, all right, and is like, I'm going to knife you if you don't give me all of your money. And then you, being the Rudy Tootin' cowboy in Texas that you are, pull out a John Hancock handgun and say, not today, motherfucker, and shoot the person. There's a good chance that this person in this hypothetical would probably be able to use the defense of self-defense. Now, let's return to our hypothetical earlier, with the three men who hypothetically surrounded the one black man in the street. Do any of these excuses apply? Probably not, especially since we know that the man was not armed. They had no reason to reasonably believe that he was armed. Again, reasonable being an objective term, not subjective. It doesn't matter necessarily what they thought, but whether what they had believed was reasonable. All right? And otherwise, he was just a guy walking down the street. It's still, at this point, murder. Let's go on. There are a couple other excuse defenses. These are all having to do with your state of mind. Probably not as relevant for discussion, but they include duress, entrapment, and intoxication. We won't include them specifically because in the hypothetical from earlier, it doesn't seem like there was really any room to include any of these. It's not like the people who murdered this man were under duress, were being forced to by some other third party under like threat of death. It's not like they were being forced to by the government. It's not like they were intoxicated when they were doing so. The last couple excuse defenses are mental disease or defect, otherwise known as insanity. And as far as I'm aware, from the construction of my hypothetical, which is entirely hypothetical and has nothing to do with the real world, bar review committee, please be kind to me. As far as we are aware, the people who were in that act, the people who committed that murder, were not under any kind of mental disease or defect at the time. Maybe further evidence will reveal otherwise, but at this point, I'm not aware of anything. Here's a question. Now that we've gone through the main excuse or justification defenses that you can introduce with a claim against a claim of murder, let's say that the hypothetical earlier also included the fact that the person who was murdered ended up trespassing onto certain premises at multiple times in the past, although not at the time that he was killed. Well, I think that the place that some people might try to go, if we're talking in the hypothetical sense, I need to get like a hat that, listen, someday if I get merch, I'll get merch that says like disclaimer on it. Put like disclaimer giant over like my titties. That'd be great. Some people might think of going to the defense of stand your ground, which is a law that currently exists in a lot of states, which goes to the effect of if someone trespasses onto your property, again, like I'm not going to go, like we learned about this in my criminal law class, but like this varies a lot state to state. So I would recommend checking with your, local state's laws. But in a lot of states, you might be able to execute a defense of self-defense, and especially using deadly force if someone trespasses onto your property. This goes to like the castle doctrine. But as far as I am aware, and again, like check your state, but really this only applies while someone is on your property. And once they are off of it, you don't have the authority to use deadly force anymore. So, and again, check your local laws. As far as I am aware, there's no exception for that. no one's really going to care once they're off once they're off your lawn, right? They're on the sidewalk. People have the right to protest or be on sidewalks. I'd like to think that I'm not going to be shot for being on a sidewalk, but we live in a society where apparently that fucking happens. So yeah. It's really interesting to me if we're still operating in this hypothetical universe where people want to introduce the fact that this hypothetical person was continuously trespassing onto the property, or like at least in a couple occasions trespassing onto the property of these people. It's really interesting to me because the fact of the matter is, this is completely irrelevant to the claim of murder. It has nothing to do with it. And really, it's the only purpose that it serves is to try and introduce some kind of bias or some kind of discredibility or trying to prejudice the people who would be the trier of facts, like assumedly a jury, against this person who was murdered. This is literally the primary example of blaming the victim. Like, I do not want to emphasize this enough. This is literally blaming the victim. Okay? I cannot understate that enough. And it surprises me to no end that people think it's justifiable if someone trespasses on your property a handful of times, that you feel like you're able to take their fucking life. If you have a problem, file a police report against them. Get them arrested and press charges for trespass. That's what you do. You don't go out and execute your own justice. That's murder. Which really does make me think that the people who are defending this in this hypothetical universe really just don't like brown people. There are a lot of other places where I wouldn't necessarily say that and necessarily go to that sort of a conclusion, but like, damn is it very hard to see otherwise here. And it's very disappointing. Why do we live in this society? Why do we live in this society? I just talked for a while. I hope I was entertaining. There are like still over 50 people here. Thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. I hope that I've been entertaining. It's weird. We've only been going for like an hour and 40 minutes. Like, we've covered a lot of ground in this short time that we've been together. So thank you for coming. We live in a society sounds like Willis. Yeah. I'm gonna read some comment. Lots of women that we live in a society. Like the priority tube tops. Riley would be able to comment on the Castle Doctrine, independent or in relation to AA. Yeah, I already did. Covered you. Got there. Thinking ahead of you. But yeah, so that's really all I got. Thank you so much for coming. I probably am going to be hanging out in my Discord for the majority of the rest of the night. I am going to be traveling over the course of this week to go back home and visit my family. So I actually need to do a lot of clipping and editing tonight for content that I'm going to be uploading throughout the week. So whereas normally I'll do that tomorrow and I'll game for the rest of the night, I'm actually going to need to take a break from gaming tonight, and you will find me back. Now, mind you, actually, so I'm trying to make it every Saturday. Next week, we're actually going to go Sunday. All right, next week, we're actually going to be going on Sundays. Next week only, we're going to be going on Sunday because I have a small conflict of time. But please stay tuned because we'll probably be starting with, I'm thinking we'll start with a video essay, and then we will go into having Creationist Cat on channel for a talk about the recent video he did where he referenced me. That's going to be a really cool chat, so please make sure to tune in for that. And yeah, I'll see you around. Before I go on, let me see. I did not get any donations, so I don't have anything to read off there. Your stream is more focused and Vosh. Wow, thanks. I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, and that's also the last thing. Like, people go through abandoned houses all the time. Like, that's something that literally everyone does. There's like entire channels on the internet devoted to that, especially with like malls. That's the most BS argument I've ever heard. Thank you. All right. I'll talk to you later, fam. Peace out. Bye.